I'm Celeste, 29, gripping the armrest of a packed transatlantic flight, my body trembling from pain I can't hide. My sister Tabitha sits beside me, her eyes cold, avoiding mine. We're headed to London to see our dad, a man we barely know anymore. In my bag, there's a vial of meds, worth $18,000, my lifeline for a condition that steals my strength. I clutch a faded photo of us as kids laughing together. Why does she hate me now? What did I do? If you've ever felt a loved one turn distant, hit like and subscribe. Where are you watching from? The cabin lights dimmed, casting a soft glow over the rows of passengers, most dozing or glued to their screens. I shifted in my middle seat, my joints aching like they were grinding against each other. Tabitha sat by the window, her posture rigid, staring out at the endless black sky. The hum of the plane's engines felt like a pulse, steady but unnerving. I reached under the seat for my carry-on, my fingers brushing the canvas, needing to feel the weight of that vial. It's a habit, checking it, like making sure my heart's still beating. I glanced at Tabitha, hoping for a flicker of the sister I used to know. Back when we were kids, we'd share secrets under blankets, giggling until Mom shushed us. Now her jaw was tight, her arms crossed like a barrier. I tried to break the silence. "You think Dad's changed much?" I asked, keeping my voice light. She didn't look at me. "You always make it about you," she snapped, her words sharp enough to sting. I froze, my hand still on the bag. The guy in the aisle seat, Miles, glanced over, his gray eyes soft with concern. I forced a smile, pretending I was fine. My condition's a rare autoimmune thing diagnosed when I was 12. It's like my body's at war with itself, sending pain through my joints on bad days. Today was one of those days, and the stress of this trip wasn't helping. I'd hoped flying with Tabitha would bring us closer, maybe heal the rift that's grown since Mom died. But her words cut deep, echoing years of resentment I hadn't wanted to face. Growing up, I was the sick kid, always at doctor's appointments, always needing Mom's attention. Tabitha was the healthy one, the one who got straight A's, played soccer, but somehow ended up in my shadow. She'd tell me I was lucky, getting all the pity. I never saw it that way. I'd have traded every hospital visit for one day of running free like her. I unzipped my bag, pulling it onto my lap, the vial's cold glass a comfort against my palm. I didn't need to take it yet, but holding it calmed me. Tabitha's eyes flicked over, narrow and unreadable. "Still obsessed with that stuff," she muttered, barely loud enough to hear. "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked, my voice quieter than I meant. She turned away, her fingers brushing the locket around her neck, the one Mom gave her before she passed. It was gold, heart-shaped, with a tiny photo of the three of us inside. I used to think it meant we were still a family. Now it felt like a reminder of what we'd lost. Nothing she said, her tone clipped. "Just don't start whining about your pain again." My chest tightened. I wanted to snap back to tell her how it felt to wake up every day wondering if my body would betray me. But I didn't. I never did. Instead, I tucked the vial back into its padded case, my hands trembling slightly. Miles shifted in his seat, his voice low. "You okay?" he asked, his tone kind, like he'd seen too many people hurt to ignore it. "I'm fine," I lied, my voice barely steady. He nodded, but his eyes lingered like he knew better. He mentioned he was a retired nurse heading to visit his daughter in London. Something about his calm presence made me feel less alone, but it didn't erase the knot in my stomach. Tabitha's words kept replaying in my head. "You always make it about you." Was that true? Had I been so wrapped up in my illness that I'd missed her pain? I thought about the years after Dad left, how Mom tried to hold us together, how Tabitha started pulling away. She'd stopped coming to my hospital visits, stopped asking how I was. I'd thought it was just her being a teenager, but maybe it was more. Maybe she'd been drowning and I hadn't noticed. I leaned back, closing my eyes, trying to push the pain down. The plane hit a pocket of turbulence, jolting me upright. My bag slid slightly and I grabbed it, heart racing. Tabitha glanced over, her expression unreadable, but there was something in her eyes, something that made my skin prickle. "You okay?" I asked, turning her question back on her. She didn't answer. just stared out the window again, her fingers tight around that locket. The silence between us felt heavier than the plane itself, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something worse was coming. The turbulence settled, but the air between Tabitha and me stayed charged like a storm waiting to break. I tucked my bag closer, my fingers lingering on the zipper as if guarding it could keep her resentment at bay. The cabin felt smaller now, the recycled air thickened my lungs. My joints throbbed a dull pulse that made it hard to think straight. I wanted to bridge the gap to find the sister who used to braid my hair when I was too weak to lift my arms. I turned to her voice, soft. "Remember when we'd sneak cookies from Mom's jar after bedtime?" I said, hoping a shared memory might crack her shell. She scoffed, her lips curling. "You got away with it because you were sick. I got grounded." Her words landed like a slap, rewriting a moment I'd cherished. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. Had I been blind to her side all along? Miles shifted beside me, his newspaper rustling. He didn't speak, but his presence felt like a quiet anchor. I envied that calm. My mind spun, replaying Tabitha's bitterness. She'd always been the strong one, the one who didn't need help. But now her anger seemed to spill over, uncontainable. I wondered if this trip was her idea of punishment, dragging me across an ocean to face a father who'd walked away. I adjusted my seatbelt, the buckle cold against my fingers. "Tabitha, why'd you even come?" I asked, keeping my tone steady, though my heart pounded. She finally looked at me, her eyes sharp like she'd been waiting for this. "To see you struggle for once," she said, her voice low but cutting. "To see you without your precious meds, without Mom to baby you." The words hit harder than my pain flares. My breath caught, and I felt the weight of every hospital stay, every missed school dance, every time I'd felt like a burden. I wanted to argue, to tell her I'd never chosen this life, but my voice stuck. The passenger in front of us turned slightly, probably catching the edge of her words. I felt exposed, like the whole plane could hear my shame. Miles leaned over, his voice gentle. "Sometimes family hurts the most because they're closest," he said, like he'd seen this kind of pain before. I nodded, grateful, but my focus stayed on Tabitha. Her hands were clenched in her lap, the locket gone from sight, like she'd tucked away any trace of softness. I tried to steady my breathing, but the ache in my body was spreading, a fire creeping through my bones. I needed my meds soon, or this flight would become unbearable. I glanced at my bag, still secure under my feet, and told myself I was overreacting. Tabitha was angry, sure, but she wouldn't do anything drastic, would she? The flight attendant. Fiona passed by, her smile professional, but warm. She paused, noticing my tense posture. "Need anything?" she asked, her voice kind enough to make my eyes sting. "Just water," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Tabitha cut in before Fiona could move. "She's fine." "Always making a scene," she said, loud enough for nearby passengers to glance over. My cheeks burned. Fiona hesitated, then nodded and walked away. I wanted to call her back to explain, but pride stopped me. Instead, I leaned back, closing my eyes, trying to block out Tabitha's words. But they echoed, mingling with memories of her standing on the sidelines while Mom fussed over me. I'd thought she was just independent, not hurting. Now her resentment felt like a living thing coiled between us, ready to strike. The plane hit another jolt, and my bag shifted slightly. I reached for it, heart racing, but Tabitha grabbed it first, saying, "I'm going to the restroom." She stood my bag in her hand and walked down the aisle. I watched her go, a chill settling in my chest. Something was wrong, and I couldn't shake the feeling that my lifeline was slipping away with her. The plane jolted again, a sharp lurch that matched the panic rising in my chest. Tabitha was still gone, my carry-on bag slung over her shoulder, as she disappeared toward the restroom. My hands gripped the armrests, my knuckles white not just from the turbulence, but from the gnawing fear that something was terribly wrong. My joints burned, the pain sharper now, like needles stabbing through my elbows and knees. I needed my meds, and the thought of them in her hands made my stomach twist. I glanced at Miles, the retired nurse beside me, hoping for some reassurance. He was reading, but his eyes flicked up, catching mine. "She's been gone a while," he said quietly. his voice steady but laced with concern. I nodded, my throat too tight to answer. The cabin felt like it was closing in the air, stale and heavy. Tabitha finally reappeared, her steps slow, deliberate, my bag still slung over her shoulder. She slid into her seat without looking at me, her face blank like she'd just stepped out for air. But my heart pounded a sick rhythm matching the pain pulsing through my joints. I leaned forward, voice low. "Give me my bag, Tabitha." She set it on her lap, her fingers lingering on the strap. "Relax," she said, her tone flat, almost mocking. "It's right here." But something in her eyes, sharp and guarded, made my skin crawl. I reached for it, but she pulled it closer, her grip tight. "You don't need to check it every 5 seconds." She snapped loud enough to make Miles glance over. My hands shook, not just from pain, but from a growing dread. "Just give it to me," I said, my voice cracking. She rolled her eyes, shoving the bag toward me. It landed hard on my lap and I fumbled to open it, my fingers clumsy with panic. The padded case was there, but it felt wrong, too light, like a hollow promise. I unzipped it, my breath hitching, as I saw the empty slot where my vial should have been. "Tabitha." I whispered, my voice barely audible over the engine's hum. "Where is it?" She didn't answer, just stared out the window, her jaw set. My vision blurred, not from tears, but from the pain spiking through me, a fire that made every movement agony. I clutched the empty case, my mind racing. She wouldn't. She couldn't. But the memory of her words, "To see you struggle for once," clawed at me, undeniable now. I turned to her, my voice louder, desperate. "What did you do with it?" She finally met my eyes, her expression cold, almost triumphant. "You're always so dramatic," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Maybe you misplaced it. Or maybe you don't need it as much as you think." Her words were a knife twisting deep. I felt the weight of every moment she'd resented me, every time she'd felt invisible next to my illness. But this wasn't just anger, it was deliberate, cruel. I wanted to scream, to shake her until she admitted it, but my body betrayed me, the pain locking my muscles, stealing my breath. Fiona, the flight attendant, passed by again, her eyes narrowing as she caught the tension. "Everything okay here?" she asked, her tone professional, but edged with concern. Tabitha spoke before I could. "She's fine," she said, her voice smooth, convincing. "Just overreacting as usual." I opened my mouth to protest, but the words wouldn't come. My hands trembled, clutching the empty case like it could bring the vial back. Fiona hesitated, her gaze flickering between us, then moved on. I felt like I was drowning, the cabin spinning around me. Miles touched my arm gently, his voice low. "I saw her near the galley earlier," he said. "She was messing with your bag." I didn't think much of it then, but he trailed off, his expression grim. His words were a lifeline, a spark of validation, but they couldn't undo what she'd done. I turned to Tabitha, my voice shaking but louder now. "You threw away $18,000 worth of meds. My meds. Do you even know what that means?" She didn't flinch, just stared back, her eyes cold. "Maybe now you'll feel what it's like," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "To be the one who doesn't matter." Before I could respond, the intercom crackled, sharp and sudden, cutting through the cabin's hum. The captain's voice came through, calm but firm. "Celeste Harper, please signal a flight attendant." My heart stopped. Tabitha's face shifted, a flash of panic breaking through her composure. The cabin seemed to hold its breath, and I felt every eye on me, the weight of her betrayal heavier than ever. The captain's voice echoed in my ears, my name hanging in the air like a verdict. Every head in the cabin turned their stares, pinning me to my seat. My hands trembled, the empty case still clutched tight, a useless shield against the humiliation washing over me. Tabitha's face was pale now, her smirk gone, replaced by a flicker of fear she couldn't hide. My pain surged, a white-hot wave that made my vision blur. But it was her betrayal that burned deeper, searing into my soul. I raised my hand, signaling Fiona, my arm heavy, as if it carried the weight of every moment Tabitha had turned against me. She hurried over, her face tight with concern. "Ms. Harper, the captain needs to speak with you," she said, her voice low but urgent. Can you come to the galley? Tabitha grabbed my wrist, her grip sharp. Don't make a scene, she hissed, her voice low enough that only I could hear. You'll embarrass us both. I yanked my arm free, my breath ragged. You did this? I said, my voice shaking but loud enough for Miles and Harper to hear. You threw away my meds. You wanted me to suffer. The words spilled out raw and unfiltered, and the cabin seemed to shrink, the air thick with tension. Harper, the young woman in front, turned fully now, her eyes wide with shock. She did what she whispered, her voice carrying just enough to make nearby passengers lean closer. Tabitha's face flushed, but she didn't back down. You're blowing this out of proportion, she said, her tone sharp, convincing, like she'd practiced this lie. You probably lost it yourself. Stop acting like I'm the villain. Her words were a fresh wound slicing through the fragile hope I'd held for us. I saw our childhood in flashes, her stealing my drawings to claim as her own, her telling our cousins I faked my illness for attention. I'd forgiven it all, chalked it up to sibling rivalry, but now I saw the truth she'd been building to this moment for years, waiting to tear me down. Fiona touched my shoulder, her voice gentle but firm. Let's go to the galley, she said, guiding me out of my seat. My legs wobbled, the pain in my joints screaming with every step, but I forced myself to move. Tabitha stood following us, her voice rising. She's lying, Fiona. She's always been like this, manipulating everyone. The accusation echoed down the aisle, and I felt the weight of every passenger's gaze, their whispers, a low hum that made my skin burn. Miles stood too, his voice steady. I saw her with the bag near the trash chute, he said loud enough for others to hear. She wasn't just stretching her legs. Tabitha froze, her eyes darting to him, then to me. For a moment I thought she'd confess, but she doubled down, her voice sharp. You're all ganging up on me, she said, her hands clenched. She's the one who's sick, not me. Why does everyone always take her side? Her words were a mirror reflecting every moment she'd felt invisible, every time Mom had chosen me over her. But they didn't justify this. They couldn't. My body was failing me, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold on to the armrest as Fiona led me forward. The galley was just ahead, a small haven from the staring eyes, but I felt exposed raw, like my pain was on display for the entire plane. As we reached the galley curtain, I turned back, catching Tabitha's gaze. Her eyes were hard, but there was something else there, guilt maybe, or fear. It didn't matter. She'd crossed a line I couldn't unsee, and the pain in my body was nothing compared to the hole she'd carved in my heart. I stepped behind the curtain, my breath shallow, my world collapsing under the weight of her betrayal. The galley curtain closed behind me, muffling the hum of the cabin, but not the storm in my chest. Fiona stood close, her eyes searching mine, concern etched into her frown. My body screamed with pain, each joint a furnace, but Tabitha's betrayal burned hotter. I leaned against the galley counter, my hands still shaking, the empty case a dead weight in my grip. The captain's voice, calling my name, still echoed a lifeline I didn't yet understand. Ms. Harper, tell me what's happening, Fiona said, her voice steady but urgent. Her badge glinted under the dim light, a small anchor in the chaos. I took a shaky breath, the words spilling out before I could stop them. My sister threw my medication away. I said, my voice low but clear. It's for a rare autoimmune condition. I need it to function, and it's gone. She threw it in the trash chute. Fiona's eyes widened, her hand pausing on her radio. You're sure? She asked, glancing toward the curtain where Tabitha waited. I nodded, my throat tight. She admitted it. Said I'm weak, that I don't need it. The words tasted bitter, each one a reminder of how far we'd fallen. I saw Miles's silhouette beyond the curtain, his quiet support, giving me courage. Harper, the young woman from the row ahead, had followed us, hovering just outside, her face pale but determined. Fiona clipped her radio to her belt, her expression hardening. I'm calling the captain, she said, and we'll check the chute, but it's a long shot. Stay here. She stepped away, her voice crackling through the radio as she relayed my story. I sank onto a fold-down seat, my legs barely holding me. The pain was relentless, a grinding ache that made my vision blur, but something else was stirring a spark of resolve I hadn't felt in years. Tabitha had spent our lives casting me as the fragile one, the one who needed saving. But I wasn't just my illness. I was done letting her define me. I pulled a crumpled napkin from my pocket, one I'd grabbed during the meal service, and found a pen in the galley. My hands shook as I started writing the words, jagged but deliberate. "Dear Dad," I began. "I'm coming to see you, but not to beg for your love. I need to know why you left, and I need to say my piece." The act of writing felt like reclaiming something, a piece of myself I'd let slip away. Harper stepped closer, her voice soft. "I heard what happened," she said, her eyes meeting mine. "My brother did something like that once. Lied about me to our parents. It hurts." Her words were a quiet balm, reminding me I wasn't alone. "Thanks," I said, my voice steadier now. I can't let her win this time." She nodded, pulling a small notebook from her bag. "Write down your doctor's info," she said. "I know someone in London who might help." Her offer was small but solid, a reminder that kindness could still exist in this mess. Fiona returned, her face grim. "The captain's aware," she said. "We're checking the chute, but it's unlikely we'll find it. I need you to stay calm, okay? We'll figure this out." I nodded, but calm wasn't what I felt. Something was shifting inside me, a fire kindling despite the pain. I wasn't just going to sit here trembling, waiting for someone to save me. I looked at Fiona, my voice firm. "I want to talk to her, in front of everyone. She doesn't get to hide this." Fiona hesitated, then nodded. "Let's go back," she said, guiding me toward the curtain. My heart pounded, not with fear, but with a strength I hadn't known I had. Tabitha had tried to break me, but I was still here, and I was ready to face her. The curtain parted and the cabin's hum hit me like a wave, every eye seeming to follow as Fiona led me back to my seat. My joints screamed with each step, but I straightened my shoulders, refusing to let Tabitha see me crumble. She sat by the window, her face tight, her hands folded like she was bracing for a fight. I didn't sit down. I stood in the aisle, my voice low but steady, the napkin with my note to Dad still crumpled in my fist. "Tabitha." I said loud enough for Miles and Harper to hear, but not a shout. "You threw away my medication. You knew what it meant to me, and you did it anyway." Her eyes flicked up sharp and defensive. "You're making a fool of yourself," she said, her voice tight. But I saw the crack in her facade, the way her fingers twitched. I shook my head, the pain in my body. A dull roar I could ignore for now. "No, you don't get to twist this. You wanted me to hurt, and I'm done letting you decide how I feel." Miles nodded slightly, his expression grim but supportive. Harper leaned forward, her notebook still in hand. Her eyes locked on me like she was witnessing something raw and real. The other passengers nearby shifted their whispers, a soft buzz, but I didn't care. This wasn't about them. It was about me, about taking back the narrative Tabitha had written for me my whole life. Fiona stood beside me, her radio crackling as the captain's voice came through, muffled but urgent. "We're searching the chute," she said, her tone professional but warm. "And I've got a passenger who thinks they have a similar med. Stay here." I nodded, but my focus stayed on Tabitha. I pulled the napkin from my pocket, smoothing it out on the tray table. The words I'd written to Dad stared back at me, jagged and honest. I added a line, my pen steady, despite my trembling hands. "I'm not your burden anymore. I'm here to speak for myself." Tabitha's eyes followed my pen, her face paling. "What are you writing?" she asked, her voice sharp, like she sensed she was losing control. Something I should have said years ago, I said, folding the napkin and tucking it into my pocket. "To Dad. To you. I'm done being the sister you punish for existing." Her mouth opened, then closed, no words coming out. For the first time, I saw her falter, her certainty crumbling. I didn't need her to confess or apologize. I needed her to see me, really see me, not as the sick girl, but as someone who could stand up even when it hurt. Harper reached over, slipping me a piece of paper with a phone number scrawled on it. "My friend's a doctor in London," she whispered. "Call her when you land. She'll help." Her voice was quiet, but it carried a strength that bolstered mine. I took the paper, my fingers brushing hers, a small connection in the chaos. "Thank you," I said, meaning it. The pain in my joints was still there, a relentless pulse, but it wasn't all of me. I turned to Fiona, my voice firm. "If you find anything, let me know. But I'm not waiting for her to fix this." Fiona nodded, her eyes softening. "We'll do what we can," she said, then moved toward the galley. Her radio crackling again. I looked at Tabitha. Her face a mix of anger and something else, maybe shame, maybe fear. I didn't care anymore. I sat down, my bag clutched close, the napkin in my pocket, a promise to myself. The plane's engines hummed steady and unyielding, and for the first time I felt like I could be too. I met Tabitha's gaze, my eyes calm but unyielding, and said nothing. The silence between us was louder than any words, a declaration that I was done being her shadow. The silence between Tabitha and me stretched heavy and unyielding as I settled back into my seat. The cabin lights buzzed faintly, casting long shadows across the tray tables. My hands still trembled, but not just from pain now. There was a quiet strength in them, born from the words I'd spoken, the line I'd drawn. Tabitha's eyes were fixed on the window, but I could see her reflection, her lips pressed thin, her fingers twisting the edge of her sleeve. Fiona returned, her face tense but composed. "We couldn't find your medication," she said softly, crouching beside me. "But a passenger had a similar vial unopened in their luggage. It was misplaced during boarding. It's yours if it matches." She held up a small, familiar-looking case, the glass inside glinting under the light. My heart skipped, hope flickering despite the ache in my bones. "Can I see it?" I asked, my voice steady but tight. Fiona handed me the case and I opened it, my breath catching. The vial was identical, same label, same weight. It wasn't mine, but it could keep me going. I clutched it, the cool glass grounding me, a small miracle in this nightmare. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick with relief. Fiona nodded, her eyes flicking to Tabitha. "We've informed the captain about the situation," she said. "He's contacting ground crew in Iceland. We're diverting there for a medical check." Tabitha's head snapped up, her eyes wide. "Diverting?" she said, her voice sharp, almost panicked. "This is ridiculous. She's fine now, isn't she?" I met her gaze, my own unwavering. "No thanks to you," I said, my words calm but cutting. The vial in my hand felt like a shield, proof I could survive her sabotage. But it wasn't enough. I needed her to understand what she'd done, not just to me, but to us. Miles leaned forward, his voice low but firm. "You put her life at risk," he said to Tabitha, his tone carrying the weight of his years as a nurse. "That's not something you just shrug off." Tabitha's face flushed, her hands balling into fists. "You don't know anything about us," she snapped, but her voice wavered like she was grasping for control. The passengers nearby shifted their murmurs, growing a quiet judgment settling over the row. I turned away, focusing on the vial, my thumb tracing its smooth edge. The pain in my joints was still there, a dull fire, but the medicine gave me a chance to endure. I thought about the napkin in my pocket, the note to Dad. Writing it had felt like breaking a chain, and now holding this vial, I felt another snap. I wasn't just the sick sister anymore. I was choosing to fight to live on my terms. Fiona touched my shoulder. "We'll need a statement when we land," she said. "The authorities will want to talk to both of you." Tabitha's eyes darted to me, a flicker of something, guilt maybe crossing her face. "You're really doing this?" she asked, her voice quieter now, almost pleading. "You're going to tell everyone I'm the bad guy?" I didn't answer right away. I looked at her, seeing the sister who'd once shared her Halloween candy with me, who'd cried when Mom died. But that sister was buried under years of resentment, and I couldn't keep pretending she'd come back. "You made that choice," I said finally, my voice soft but firm. "Not me." The plane tilted slightly, beginning its descent toward Iceland. The cabin grew quiet, the weight of what was coming settling over us. Tabitha turned back to the window, her reflection pale, her hands still. I held the vial tighter, my heart steady despite the pain, knowing I'd taken a stand, but unsure what it would cost us both. The plane's descent was smooth, but the air between Tabitha and me felt jagged like broken glass. I sat clutching the borrowed vial, its weight a fragile lifeline against the pain clawing through my joints. Tabitha's silence was louder than her words had ever been. Her face turned away, her shoulders hunched like she could block out the world. I didn't look at her directly, but I caught her reflection in the window, her eyes glistening not with tears but with something harder like regret she refused to name. Fiona had moved to the front, coordinating with the crew, her voice a low murmur over the radio. The cabin was quiet, passengers settling into an uneasy hush, their glances flickering toward us. Harper, the woman in front, had turned back to her book, but her pen tapped restlessly, a silent echo of my own tension. Miles sat still, his hands folded, but his presence was a steady warmth like a lighthouse in a storm. I slipped the napkin from my pocket, unfolding it to reread the words I'd written to Dad. The ink was smudged from my grip, but the message held firm. I wasn't here to beg. I tucked it back, my fingers brushing the paper. Harper had given me her friend's number, a small promise of help. I needed that now, not just for my body, but for the pieces of me Tabitha had tried to shatter. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing our landing in Iceland. "We'll have medical personnel waiting," he said, his tone calm but clipped. I felt Tabitha flinch beside me, her hands tightening on her armrest. She didn't speak, but her silence was heavy with the weight of what she'd done. I wanted her to say something, anything to show she understood the cost of her actions. But she didn't. When the plane touched down, the jolt sent a fresh spike of pain through me, but I swallowed it, focusing on the vial in my hand. Fiona approached, her expression soft but serious. "The authorities will need to speak with you both," she said, "and we'll get you to a medic for that vial." Tabitha stood abruptly, her bag clutched to her chest, and headed for the exit without a word. I watched her go, her steps quick like she could outrun what she'd done. Part of me wanted to call after her to demand an apology, but I didn't. I'd spent years chasing her approval, and I was done. Miles touched my arm, his voice low. "I had a brother who hurt me once," he said, his eyes distant. Forgiving him didn't mean letting him back in. It meant letting myself move on. His words settled over me, heavy but true, like a stone smoothed by years of wear. I stood, my legs unsteady, and followed Fiona toward the exit. The Icelandic air hit me as we stepped off the plane, cold and sharp, cutting through the haze of pain. Tabitha stood a few feet away, speaking to an airport official, her voice low, her gestures defensive. She didn't look at me, but I felt her awareness like a thread stretched taut between us. The medic approached, a kind-faced woman who checked the vial and confirmed it was safe for me to use. I took a dose, the relief slow but real, easing the fire in my joints. But the ache in my chest remained a wound no medicine could touch. Tabitha's betrayal had shifted something fundamental, and as I watched her avoid my gaze, I knew we'd never be the same. The plane loomed behind us, a silent witness to our unraveling, and I stood there holding the vial, feeling the weight of my choice to stand up and the heavier weight of what it had cost. The Icelandic airport was a blur of cold metal and glass, the air sharp with the scent of jet fuel as we reboarded the plane. Tabitha had been moved to a seat near the back, a decision made by the crew to keep us apart. I sat alone now, the window seat mine, the vast sky stretching out beyond the glass. My joints ached, less the borrowed medication dulling the fire, but my heart still carried a quiet weight like a stone smoothed by time, but too heavy to set down. I pulled my journal from my bag, its leather cover worn from years of use. The pages were filled with sketches and notes, moments I'd captured to make sense of my life. I flipped to a blank page, my pen hovering, unsure where to start. The plane hummed softly, climbing toward London, and the dawn light crept through the window, painting the clouds in soft pinks and golds. I thought about Mom, not the way she'd been at the end, frail and fading, but the way she'd been before, laughing as she taught me to bake bread, her hands steady even when mine weren't. She'd always told me strength wasn't about being unbreakable, it was about showing up even when you were scared. I'd spent so long feeling like my illness made me less, but sitting here I realized I'd been showing up my whole life. I wrote a single line, "I'm enough just as I am." The words felt foreign, like they belonged to someone braver, but they were mine. I traced them again, the ink sinking into the paper, a quiet vow. The cabin was calm, most passengers dozing, their faces softened by sleep. I envied that peace, but I was starting to find my own. Harper, the woman from the row ahead, had stayed behind in Iceland, connecting me with her doctor friend via a quick text. Her kindness lingered, a reminder that strangers could offer what family sometimes couldn't. I tucked her note into my journal next to the napkin I'd written for Dad. That note wasn't just for him anymore. It was for me, a promise to speak my truth, no matter how he responded. I glanced at Miles, now seated across the aisle, his newspaper folded neatly in his lap. He caught my eye and smiled, a small gesture that felt like understanding. "You're doing all right," he said, his voice low, like he knew I didn't need more words. I nodded, grateful for his quiet faith in me. The flight attendant Fiona passed by, her steps light. She paused, checking on me with a look that felt like a hug. "We'll be in London soon," she said. "You've got this." Her words were simple, but they settled over me, warm and steady, like a blanket on a cold night. I turned back to the window, the clouds thinning as the plane climbed higher. For the first time in hours, I let myself breathe deeply, the air filling my lungs without resistance. The pain was still there, a low hum, but it didn't own me. I'd faced Tabitha, spoken my truth, and survived. That was enough for now. I rested my head against the window, the cool glass soothing, and let the dawn light wash over me, carrying me toward whatever came next. The dawn light softened, blending into a pale blue as the plane steadied, carrying us closer to London. I closed my journal, the leather warm from my hands, and tucked it into my bag. My fingers brushed the vial of borrowed medication, its presence a quiet reminder of the kindness I'd found in strangers. The pain in my joints had dulled to a low thrum, manageable now, but it was the ache in my chest that felt lighter, like I'd finally set something down. A folded piece of paper slipped from her seat pocket when she'd left, landing near my foot. I picked it up and, hesitating, then unfolded it. It was a note, her handwriting sharp and hurried. I didn't mean for it to go this far. No apology, no explanation. Just those words, raw and incomplete. I stared at them, feeling no anger, only a quiet sadness. I folded the note and slipped it into my journal, not as forgiveness, but as a marker of where we stood. I thought about Dad waiting in London, a man who'd left us when the weight of my illness became too much. I'd spent years blaming myself, thinking if I'd been healthier, he'd have stayed. But sitting here with the sky stretching endless outside, I realized his leaving wasn't about me. It was about him, his limits, his choices. I didn't need his answers anymore. I needed to ask my own questions and live with the truth. Fiona walked by, her steps slow, deliberate. She handed me a small cup of tea, the steam curling up like a whisper. "You're stronger than you know," she said, her voice soft, like she was sharing a secret. I took the cup, its warmth seeping into my palms, and nodded. I'm starting to believe that I said my voice quiet but sure. The plane's hum was a steady rhythm now, a backdrop to my thoughts. I thought about the years I'd spent carrying Tabitha's resentment, letting it shape how I saw myself. I'd let her anger become my mirror, but no more. I sipped the tea, its bitterness grounding me, and looked out at the horizon where the first hints of London's skyline were just visible. I didn't know what meeting Dad would bring, or if Tabitha would ever see me as more than the sister who stole her light. But I knew I wasn't that girl anymore, the one who apologized for existing. I'd faced her betrayal, stood up in front of strangers, and chosen to keep going. That was my strength, not my illness. I set the cup down, the ceramic cool against my fingers, and let my eyes linger on the sky. It was vast, endless, a reminder that my story wasn't over. I was still writing it, one choice at a time, and for the first time, I felt like the author, not the character someone else defined. The plane dipped slightly, the city growing closer, and I breathed slowly, ready to step into whatever came next. The London rain tapped softly against the cafe window, a gentle rhythm that matched the quiet hum of my thoughts. I sat across from Dad Gregory, his face lined with years I hadn't seen, his hands wrapped around a chipped mug of coffee. The cafe smelled of burnt toast and damp wool, grounding me in this moment far from the plane's chaos. My joints ached faintly, the borrowed medication holding the pain at bay, but it was the calm in my chest that felt new, like a door I'd finally unlocked. Tabitha sat a few tables away, her eyes fixed on her phone, her presence a shadow I could now choose to step around. I'd told the airport officials in Iceland I didn't want to press charges, not out of forgiveness, but because I didn't want her actions to define me anymore. She'd agreed to therapy, a small step, but one I wouldn't hold my breath for. That was her path, not mine. I looked at Dad, his gray eyes avoiding mine, and took a sip of my tea, the warmth spreading through me. "Why did you leave?" I asked, my voice steady, not accusing, just needing to know. He shifted his fingers, tightening on the mug. "It was too much," he said, his voice low, rough. "Your illness, your mom's worry. I wasn't strong enough." His words didn't surprise me, but they settled something like a puzzle piece clicking into place. I'd spent years thinking I'd driven him away, but now I saw it clearly. His leaving was about his limits, not my worth. I nodded, letting the truth sink in, not needing to argue or beg for more. I'd called Harper's doctor friend that morning, a woman named Dr. Ellis, who'd promised to help me get new medication. Her voice over the phone had been kind, practical, a reminder that I could rebuild one step at a time. I'd booked a small flat in London for a month, a quiet space to rest, to start over. It wasn't a grand gesture, just a choice to stay, to face my life head on. The cafe door jingled as a couple walked in, shaking rain from their coats. I watched them, their easy laughter a contrast to the weight of this table. I thought about the years I'd spent carrying guilt for my illness, for Dad's absence, for Tabitha's anger. I'd let their choices shape me, but not anymore. I set my cup down, the clink soft but deliberate, a small act of claiming this moment as mine. Dad cleared his throat, his voice hesitant. "I'm glad you came," he said, the words awkward but sincere. I looked at him, seeing not the father I'd lost, but the man he was now, flawed and human. I didn't need his approval anymore, just this conversation, this chance to let go. I glanced at Tabitha, her head still bowed over her phone. I didn't know if we'd ever be sisters again, not the way we were, but I was okay with that. I was learning to be okay with a lot of things, my pain, my limits, my strength. The rain outside slowed, a faint drizzle now, and I felt my breath ease, like I was finally exhaling after holding it too long. I leaned back in the cafe chair, the wooden frame creaking softly, and let the quiet settle around me. The rain had stopped, leaving the windows streaked with faint droplets, each catching the gray light of London's morning. Dad sipped his coffee, his silence heavy but not unkind. I didn't need more from him now, just this moment of honesty, raw and unpolished. Tabitha glanced over from her table, her eyes meeting mine for a second before darting away, like she wasn't ready to face what we'd become. I thought about the flat I'd rented, a small studio with a view of a narrow street where I'd start my mornings with tea and sunlight. It wasn't a fix for everything my condition would always be there, a quiet shadow, but it was a space to rebuild, to choose what I carried forward. I'd started a new habit this morning, writing one thing I was grateful for today. It was the courage to speak even when my voice shook. Looking at Dad, I saw the years we'd lost, not as a wound, but as a map of where we'd been. "I don't blame you anymore," I said, my voice soft but clear. "But I need boundaries." "We start slow, okay?" He nodded, his eyes glistening, and for the first time I felt like we were meeting as equals, not as a daughter chasing a ghost. Tabitha stood gathering her things and walked out without a word. I watched her go, her silhouette fading into the drizzle outside. I didn't feel anger, just a quiet resolve to let her find her own way. I'd spent too long trying to fix us, but healing wasn't about forcing her to change, it was about choosing who I let shape my life. Dr. Ellis had already sent me a list of clinics, and I'd make my own path here, one step at a time. The cafe hummed with low chatter, the clink of cups, the rustle of newspapers. I felt a stillness I hadn't known in years, not peace exactly, but a clarity that felt like freedom. I wasn't my illness or Tabitha's resentment or Dad's absence. I was Celeste, and I was enough. The lesson wasn't grand or flashy, It was simple healing starts when you stop letting others write your story. You choose your own ending, even if it's messy, even if it's small. What's a moment that made you realize you could rewrite your own story? Share it below. I'd love to hear how you found your strength. If this story touched you, hit like, subscribe, or share it with someone who needs it. Thank you for listening, for being here. Keep choosing yourself, and may you find peace in your own way.